A giraffe's neck is too short to reach the ground, and this is why they have to spread their legs in order to drink water. So the information that I'm going to be talking about is important to my audience, I think, because I think it's really cool to learn new facts and just kind of little bits of information that they might not have otherwise known. So my topic is going to be the climate and the environment of the savanna in Africa, and also the wildlife and how the two work together to form an ecosystem. So my first point is going to be the climate and / environment of the savanna. So the climate of the savanna is mostly warm, with periods of wet months and dry months. So the wet months are when it's rainy, dry months are when it's not. So the vegetation, which is also kind of part of the environment and climate, it's also called the producers. They are a very important part of the savanna, and they rely heavily on the climate being good and staying the same year to year. So let's see, again, so there are wet months, which again is when it's raining, and so all the plants and vegetation are really flourishing, and then there are your dry months. So some of you might be asking, how do the plants survive during the dry months? And according to Tim Lewis, some of the vegetation actually has deep enough root structures to be able to reach the groundwater, which is water that has kind of settled far beneath the surface of the earth. And so that's how they will survive throughout the dry months. So that's a pretty kind of broad brush of the climate of the savanna. And next we will go into the wildlife and kind of what that looks like. So we've already talked about the vegetation, how those are the producers, so that's like the bottom of our food chain. The second step is going to be our primary consumers, which are also called herbivores. And so these are the animals that, again, they rely on vegetation to survive, so plants only. And they are, again, that second step, so primary consumers. A couple examples of those would be elephants, giraffes, impalas, again, animals that are only eating vegetation. So the second group is the omnivores. Omnivores are the ones that eat both plants and animals. So they are just called consumers, I believe. They're not, secondary consumers or anything like that. They're just consumers, and again, they eat both plants and animals. So a couple examples of these are going to be bamboos, jackals, or ostriches. So the final group, as we all know, is carnivores, and these are the animals that only eat meat. So these are your very, very top of like the food pyramid, and they're the predators and everything. So a couple examples of these, as we all know, would be lions, cheetahs, hyenas, and of course there's many more. So quick little recap there. Let's see, we have our producers, which again, plants and vegetation, and then in our consumers, we have herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. And yeah. So my third point is how the climate and how climate, environment, and wildlife work together to form an ecosystem. So basically, like we've kind of been touching on briefly throughout the whole presentation, is that everything kind of relies on one another. So our producers or our consumers all rely on the producers in different levels of the food chain. So another kind of thing that the relationship between producers and consumers and climate and wildlife have is that there is competition between each level, like each group within each level of the food pyramid. And this kind of just helps keep population under control and things like that. A little bit of the survival of the fittest stuff, which always sounds kind of mean, but is what it is. So finally, I would just like to thank you for coming on this little tour of the savanna with me. I hope that I've been able to teach you something that you might not have known. And again, just to kind of summarize, we talked about the climate and the environment of the savanna, and then we talked about some wildlife and kind of how the two work together to form an ecosystem. So in conclusion, every part of every ecosystem relies on one another in order to function. So thank you.